This video is going to be all about the bloom on our eggs, what it is, and why we want it. To keep things really simple, the bloom is a protective layer that's laid on the outside of the eggshell. It is the last thing that happens in the egg production process. It is a protective layer that covers all of the pores on the outside of the eggshell so that bacteria and just nasty things cannot get inside of that eggshell. Now, of course, in nature, the purpose of the bloom is to protect that developing embryo inside the egg while a mama hen is sitting on her clutch from all of those like pathogens and just things in the dirt wherever she's sitting. For those of us who consume eggs, that bloom keeps the egg safe so that we could potentially store our eggs at room temperature for really up to about 2 or 3 months, given the temperatures in the room where we're storing them aren't so high that they're going to accidentally incubate those eggs. In the refrigerator, eggs with the bloom still intact can be kept good for up to like 6 months. Store-bought eggs need to be kept in the refrigerator because the bloom has been washed off. And really, anytime the bloom is washed off an egg, those eggs need to be refrigerated to help keep bacteria from being able to enter the egg. Anytime, whether they're washed or unwashed, that eggs have been refrigerated, they need to continue to be refrigerated after that point. But there's another thing about the bloom, and this is the thing that I am primarily interested in, and it's not just blooms, it's speckles. So the same way that we get some of our hens who will throw us these beautifully speckled eggs, we get other hens, or sometimes the same hens, that throw speckles and blooms, but some of our hens also throw us really heavy blooms. Now, the bloom is present on the egg, whether you can see it or not, but in some of these eggs that these hens are laying, the bloom is so heavy that it will almost change the color of the egg. So this olive egg, for example, on olive eggs, blooms have a tendency to make them look green. Can you see the difference? This kind of cloudy layer right there is the bloom, and then we see the egg color underneath. Also, it's not limited to Morans or green eggs. Oftentimes, those eggs that look pink or purple, those are also heavy blooms. You can see here, it's almost you can see the bloom sort of scraped off. This is one of my blue lace red Wyandotte eggs. And don't worry, even though I used that little wet spot to show you the bloom, you can see right here, that's where I made that first spot, and it's already dried up. The bloom is still intact. The way that we wash the bloom off is when we wash with some sort of soap or sanitizer, or when we scrub with like a sponge in the sink. When we collect eggs from our farm, for example, and we scrape off a little bit of poop from the outer eggshell, or we use like a paper towel and get the really messy parts off the egg, we're not messing with the bloom. I have also found that heavy blooms and speckles seem to be genetic in my flock. So I always hatch from eggs with heavy blooms, and I always hatch from eggs with speckles because I love them. And I think that they make beautiful additions to any egg basket. And I have found that those heavy blooms and speckles tend to pass down to offspring, and not just from hens, but from roosters as well. So oftentimes Don Juan's offspring will throw me heavy speckles on eggs because he carries those genetics for heavy speckles in his dark brown eggs. But look, genetics are science, but like egg color genetics are not necessarily an exact science. So we're always sort of testing the waters and trying new things and just seeing what happens. It's a beautiful labor of love and creative expression, if you ask me.